Hello, Tony, your deck architect here, back on my channel once more with another deck profile. So before Grand Creators comes out and floods the internet with deck profiles of isekai enthusiasts, waifu nuns, and Japanese art thugs, I do want to at least cover one deck profile from one of the many cool decks to come out of Brothers of Legend. While I initially thought to cover a pure Lyrilisk deck profile with all of its support at its disposal, in light of my recent OTS polls, I am instead going to be covering the deck that received the most amount of support from that set. That being the Utopia deck. Now, longtime followers of this channel may recall that this is not the first time I've taken a foray into Utopia. In fact, I've actually covered Utopia twice before on this channel, each time bringing you a different take on the deck. The first iteration was one that took advantage of Xyz's change tactics to effectively draw out your deck and make an infinite Utopic Zexal lock. The second iteration took a greater focus on Xyz spamming to put up enough monsters to make multiple Utopic Future Dracos. But this third iteration will be aiming to bring to center stage three iconic mechanics of the Zexal anime, that being the numbers, the rank up magics, and the Zexal Weapons. If you recall, way back with the release of Lightning Overdrive, we got a slew of Utopia support designed to focus predominantly on the Zexal Weapon mechanic. At that time, however, the deck was incomplete, lacking their penultimate boss monster. Brothers of Legend brings that boss monster to the TCG, finally allowing us access to that deck at full power. But more importantly, Brothers of Legend imports the Overlay Universe structure deck, a structure deck with a heavy focus on turning Utopia into the nexus of all numbers. Combining these two supports together, we can produce a deck that can very easily generate impressive disruptive boards at the onset of just making a singular Utopia. The centerpiece of this new strategy is the new number Xyz monster number 99 Utopia Dragonar. Dragonar is a rank 12 Xyz monster packing a very powerful effect. Once per hard turn, as a quick effect, Dragonar can detach 2 of its Xyz material to Xyz summon any number monster with a number between 1 to 100 directly from the X deck. Given the vastness of that range and the flexibility of the conditions, Utopia Dragonar can potentially summon upwards of 123 different monsters with its effect. This leads to some very cool plays that we can abuse to produce a variety of different board configurations, each capable of responding flexibly to any deck. But you may have noticed that Utopia Dragonar is a rank 12 Xyz monster requiring 3 level 12 monsters to make. Not exactly the easiest thing to set up. Fortunately, we will never be hard summoning Utopia Dragonar. Instead, we will be ranking up into him using the new rank up magic, Hyper Rank Up Magic Utopia Force. Utopia Force is a powerful card, able to target any rank 9 or lower Utopia monster, like our base Utopia, to rank it up to a rank 10 or higher Utopia monster, like our Utopia Dragonar. Additionally, Utopia Force also has the additional effect of attaching itself from the graveyard to any Xyz monster summoned by the effect of a rank 10 or higher Utopia monster. This effect gives the numbers you summon off of Dragonar an Xyz material, allowing you full access to their effects once they're summoned. And these two cards serve as the crux of this deck's strategy. Step 1, make a Utopia. Step 2, use Utopia Force to rank Utopia up into your Utopia Dragonar. Step 3, activate Utopia Dragonar's effect to summon out any number and attach Utopia Force to it. Step 4, rinse and repeat until the opponent is overwhelmed. This strategy is aided by the mountain of support, old and new, that the deck has at its disposal to search into Utopia Force and make Utopias. Add in a few hand traps and you have a deck capable of playing akin to modern meta decks, making powerful boards backed by hand traps to seal games. And that is what I aim to showcase as I get through the deck profile. Anyway, I've droned on enough. Without a further ado, let's get into the deck profile. Starting off our deck profile, we have the return of a series of monsters hailing from our last Utopia deck profile, that being the ZS monsters in 3 ZS Ascendant Sage and 3 ZS Armed Sage. If you recall from that last profile, both of these monsters have swarming effects, with Ascended Sage being able to special summon himself while you control no other cards, and Armed Sage being able to special summon himself while you only control a single level 4 monster. These swarming effects make both ZS monsters suitable options to help produce a Utopia. But that isn't what is of particular interest here. No, the real meat of these two monsters is their secondary effects that we did not cover in our prior profile. That being the effects they grant to a Utopia Xyz summoned using them as material. Both ZS monsters add a summon trigger effect to your newly made Utopia monster, allowing it to search for a ZW monster if made using an Armed Sage, or a rank up magic if made using an Ascended Sage. The former we will expand on later, but the latter is what is particularly important here, as it grants us access to our Utopia Force needed to turn Utopia into Dragonar. This is the simplest and most efficient way into our Utopia Dragonar plays, and as such is the reason why we play max copies of Ascended Sage alongside a number of upcoming options to access it. Moving on from there, we have a new monster in our 3 Astral Utopia. Astral Utopia is a light level 4 warrior, perfect for making Utopia, which packs 2 very useful effects. The first is a swarming effect to special summon itself from the hand while you control an Xyz monster. While this effect isn't exactly useful in making that initial Utopia, it does have some cool uses in certain board states with a certain Xyz monster we'll discuss later. The second effect allows us to discard a card in our hand to search for any Xyz, Onomat, Zexal, or number spell trap card. Now, we aren't playing any Xyz or Onomat cards in this deck, but we are playing several Zexal and number cards that Astral Utopia can search for. One in particular is the spell Zexal Construction, which can search for any ZS, ZW, or rank up card. This means that Astral Utopia can indirectly access the entirety of our deck's plays, which itself means that, alongside any level 4 monster, Astral Utopia is another way into our Dragonar plays. Adding this onto the number of Ascended Sage we play, these Zexal Constructions, and then other relevant search spells, we have around 13 ways to set up a Utopia with a rank up magic Utopia Force. A rather consistent amount to guarantee we will always see that play in our opening hand. Now after Astral Utopia, we have another Astral monster in our 3 Astro Kuribo. Astro Kuribo is a level 1 light fiend that can reveal any number from the extra deck to special summon itself from the hand and make its level equal to its rank. While Astro Kuribo is summoned this way, you can only summon number monsters from your extra deck. Additionally, a number monster made using Astro Kuribo gains protection against destruction by battle or card effects. Almost inverse to Astral Utopia, Astro Kuribo is incredibly effective at sticking that initial Utopia to the field. Its first effect makes it an easy extender into not just Utopia, but any number monster you wish to access, while the second effect helps protect that Utopia in the interim period between its summon and its use as a rank up material. Unfortunately, because of the number restriction package with its summon effect, you really can't use Astro Kuribo to make general Xyz. And because we lose the granted protection once we rank up, one could argue that this effect is almost wasted in this application. But I'd argue that making and sticking that Utopia to ensure getting to Dragonar is the most important choke point of the deck. Since Dragonar is a quick effect, once it hits the field, it can play around interruptions and removal much better than Utopia can. Thus, up to the point of actually landing that Dragonar, the only weak link in our deck is the rank up of the Utopia itself. Being protected from destruction means that our opponent cannot destroy the Utopia before or as it achieves Dragonar Ascension, and given the prevalence of DPE in our current format, that is a very important thing. Breaking away from our Utopia plays, our next 2 monsters are the ZW options that we play in our 1 ZW Tornado Bringer and 1 ZW Pegasus Twin Sabers. Both cards have effects to equip themselves to a Utopia monster we control, either from the hand in Tornado Bringer's case or from the field in Twin Sabers' case. While equipped, they grant Utopia additional attack and bonus effects. Tornado Bringer protects the equipped monster from targeting by card effects. This is just a decent effect in this modern day and age. Twin Sabers, on the other hand, can, once per turn, negate an on-field monster effect as it resolves. This effect is a continuous effect, meaning that it does not activate, instead allowing you to choose on the resolution of an effect whether you want to apply the negation or not. This kind of negation is one of the most powerful in the game, being so absolute and comprehensive that it even gets around unrespondable effects and effect activation negation to ensure that you can stop any effect. Unfortunately, because Pegs' twin sabers can only equip from the field, he is a bit of a brick opening. Actually, to be fair, both are bricks to open as neither really do anything until you make a Utopia. Fortunately, we have a few options to ensure that we will never functionally brick with them, and we have the means to ensure we can always access them at the right time. One such means is through our Arm Sage, which can search into a ZW like our Tornado Bringer as we make the Utopia needed to equip Tornado Bringer. The other is our new boss monster in our Ultimate Leo Utopia Raid, a card we will cover more when we reach the extra deck. Finally, wrapping up the monster lineup, we have 2 Photon Thrasher as a generic level 4 extender to pair with any of our starters, 3 Effect Veiler for effect negation, and 3 Ash Blossom for search negation. Since our deck just needs a single Xyz to pop off and nothing else, we have less of a need to play copious amounts of extenders to get to a sustainable board state. This affords us a ton of room to play hand traps instead to better back up our board. Now, some of you may ask, given this extra amount of space, why am I not playing some additional engine like the automat cards? Well, while it's true that the automat cards are adept at making Xyz plays, they really don't contribute much toward the Dragonar line outside of just making Utopia. While that theoretically is the basis of the deck, it provides us no additional benefits like accessing Utopia Force or protecting it from threats to make it feel like it's actually accomplishing anything else. Furthermore, the automat cards have issues working with cards outside of themselves. While cards like Bancho and Glove work fantastically with each other, they only extend off of each other and none of our other cards. This means that opening singular components of this engine really doesn't do much for our plays outside of being a body that we can normal summon to make a rank 4. Worse, it also means that if we do not commit to summoning an automat monster, we can't access the rest of the engine as none of the automat cards extend off of our other monsters. Now obviously I can circumvent this by playing the full package of searchers granted to this deck, but that makes this engine blow to almost 15 cards. 15 cards that could otherwise be things more suited toward our particular strategy or hand traps instead. Going into the spells, we start with our primary searcher in our 3 Zexal Construction. Zexal Construction allows us to reveal any card in our hand, search for any ZW, ZS, Zexal, rank up magic or rank down magic card, and then shuffle back the revealed card into the deck. This is functionally the card equivalent of performing the Recontract Universe power seen in the Zexal anime, allowing us to turn any card in our hand into a Zexal themed support that we need. This card searches for both ZS monsters, which allows us access to all their plays. This card also searches directly for our Utopia Force, which is useful when we already opened the ZS monsters. At worst, this card can search for a ZW monster, which we can use having already established a board to further bolster it. And while you can view the shuffle back as a neg1 in card advantage, it does have some minor application in shuffling back brick cards like our Pegasus Twin Sabers to ensure they are in the deck to be accessed by other cards. And because Zexal Conversion searches and shuffles on resolution, you aren't actually losing said card until it successfully resolves, meaning that it's quite safe to activate against Ash as well. From there, we then have 3 of the aforementioned hyper rank up magic Utopia Force. Now, some would argue that 3 might be a little excessive, especially given the amount of options that we have at our disposal to search it. But I would argue that using those options creates windows for disruption, and that can be a little risky. As nice as it is to search into this card, it's equally nice to just open it and unsuspectingly turn a random Utopia into Dragonar without much interaction. Thus, we're playing 3 to maximize our chances of that. Our last Zexal themed support is our 1 Zexal Entrust. Zexal Entrust is a themed monster reborn for our deck, able to revive any ZS, ZW, or Utopia monster from our graveyard. This is decent recovery that we can access with cards like our Zexal Construction or our Astral Utopia to get us back in the game. Furthermore, while in the graveyard, should your life points be lower than 2,000 of your opponent's, you can banish Zexal Entrust to add back any other Zexal spell or trap in the graveyard. This effect is another decent recovery option, as it grabs back Zexal Construction in later turns for us to use, another means of getting us back into the game. Then, wrapping up the spells, we start with our 3 Parry Raise map. Parry Raise map can halve our life to search for any monster with 0 attack. This helps us twofold. Firstly, it searches for Astral Utopia, a key component in a lot of our plays. Secondly, it halves our life, putting us at a lower life point range than our opponent to make use of cards like Zexal Entrust's second effect or Pex's Twin Saber's special summon effect. Then we have 1 Rhoda to search into our warriors like our ZS monsters, Astral Utopia, or just our Photon Thrasher. 1 Double or Nothing for our Utopia double plays. 2 Crossout Designator for hand traps, as well as 1 Call by the Grave. Going into the traps, we have 3 Infinite Impermanence as another hand trap, as well as 1 Numbers Protection. Numbers Protection is an Inferni barrier for numbers monsters, able to negate any activated spell, trap, or monster effect while we control a number monster. This is another decent option to search off of our Astral Utopia in hands where we already opened the other pieces, to give our board protection against blowout cards like Dark Ruler or Lightning Storm. Additionally, while in the graveyard, Numbers Protection can reset itself to the field whenever a number monster is destroyed, a useful effect when your opponent pushes back to set up a negate on the next turn to ensure our follow-up play goes through. Going into the X deck, we of course have our 2 Utopia Dragonar as our main playmaker. Fun fact, because Dragonar is a number, Utopia Dragonar can summon a second Utopia Dragonar from the X deck. This can be useful given Dragonar's massive attack and its second effect, to reduce an attacking monster's attack to 0, which just makes getting rid of your board twice as hard. We also have 1 Utopia Double. Outside of being a cheeky way to end games by pure damage alone, Utopia Double is also a way to protect our granted Zexal server effects by using its quick effect to dodge targeting effect negation. Of course, we will be using its effect to go into one of our 2 base Utopias, of which we can then slap on a singular 1 number C39 Utopia Ray for an extra material before ranking it up into Dragonar. Alternatively, we can go into a Utopia the Lightning for some battle phase beatdown, as well as we also have the new Utopia in the 1 Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray. Leo Utopia Ray is always considered a number C39 Utopia Ray, making this card a viable number to be summoned off of your Dragonar. While on the field, Leo Utopia Ray can detach a material to equip any ZW monster from the deck or X deck to it as if it was equipped by that ZW monster's effect. This effect's activation and effect cannot be negated, meaning that even if your opponent would Valor or Imperm this monster beforehand or during the effect, this condition would force the effect through to successfully resolve, making it very hard to stop. And while equipped with the ZW monster, Leo Utopia Ray can, as a quick effect, target 1 monster on the field and negate its effects. Combining this card with Pegasus Twin Sabers results in a double monster disruption against your opponent. Since we can summon this card with Dragonar and then attach Utopia Force to it to make live its effect, this is our go-to target to summon off our Dragonar for both offense and defense. From there, we then have 1 Hope Harbinger as another decent target for Dragonar's effect as spell negation, 1 Giant Hand that we can make using an Astro Kuribo as another effect negation, 1 Zeus since we're playing all these Xyz monsters, 1 Dweller for Graveyard Disruption, 1 Tornado Dragon for Spell and Trap Destruction, as well as 1 ZS Utopic Sage. ZS Utopic Sage is a rank 4 that can detach 2 materials to summon out any ZS monster from our deck. This is just another way for us to access our Ascended Sage when we open too many extenders but no way into the rank up. By making this card using any 2 level 4 monsters, we can summon out the Ascended Sage to then overlay with another level 4 to start off our Dragonar line. Additionally, while in the field or graveyard, Utopic Sage can banish itself to protect our Utopia monsters from destruction, a useful bonus effect to help us guard against mass removal like Lightning Storm. Now this leaves us with 1 remaining slot in our X deck. This remaining slot can be a number of different options to be accessed off of our Dragonar. A few of these I'll showcase in the combo component, but to list some of the more generic options, you could play the 1 Baguska to flash in against non-linked decks to negate the entire field. You can also play a Stealth Kraken to pop cards on your opponent's side of the field on their turn, as well as ruin attribute based decks. Alternatively, you could also play something like a Pain Gainer or number 77, the 7 Sins, for a big beater. Given the over 100 options at your disposal, there are a lot of cool plays you could accomplish with Dragonar's effect, options that I'll leave you to mess around with. Now it's at this point that we once again reach the combo component of the deck profile. Now since this deck is rather simplistic, I mean you're pretty much making Dragonar and then going from there, I'll only be doing 2 quick test hands to showcase how to get to said Dragonar. The rest of this combo component will be more to showcase how to utilize Dragonar in different ways against different decks. With that being said, I do believe the deck is shuffled, the field is ready, let us begin. Starting with our first hand, the hand that we're going to be working with for this first combo is going to include 1 Crossout Designator, a second Crossout Designator, great, 1 Ash Blossom, 1 Zexal Server Ascended Sage, as well as 1 Parry Raise map. Okay, just looking at this hand here, I can already see that we have the components to access our Utopia Dragonar. First off, we open the ZS Ascended Sage, which is a way into our Utopia Force. Likewise, we open a Parry Raise map, which allows us to search into our Astral Utopia as our other level 4, but also as another means to access our Utopia Force. Backing that up against hand traps, we have 2 Crossout Designator to answer all those pesky things that could stop our plays, as well as 1 Ash Blossom for later against our opponent. So let's see what we can do with this hand. Beginning with my main phase, I'm going to activate the Parry Raise map as it's the first thing I can do, and I'm going to use it to search for a monster with 0 attack, in this case being my Astral Utopia. From there, since I control no cards, I can then special summon out the ZS Ascended Sage before then normal summoning out the Astral Utopia. Now this is an opportunity for me to bait out some hand traps. I'm going to activate my Astral Utopia, discarding a card here, hopefully to trigger a hand trap, because regardless of if they answer the Astral Utopia or not, we still have the search off the ZS Ascended Sage going forward. But in the grand case where they don't actually hand trap this card, we can then use the effect to grab a Zexal Conversion. From there, we'll then overlay the ZS Ascended Sage alongside the Astral Utopia to make our Utopia double. In doing so, tricking ZS Ascended Sage's granted effect to give my Utopia the ability to search for a rank up magic on summon. Now, once again, we can bait out hand traps, because at this moment, if our opponent decides to do Imperm or Veiler, we can then chain the effect of our Utopia double to become a Utopia monster to dodge that targeting effect. In doing so, we're also then going to add a double or nothing as well. Now, since the target was lost, the effect of the Utopia double will resolve and allow us to add the Utopia Force. From there, before I actually rank up into the Utopia Dragonar, I'm first going to slap on top a C39. The reason I'm doing this is now that when I rank up into my Utopia Dragonar, that Utopia Dragonar will have an additional material for a total of a 4 material Utopia Dragonar. Now to this point, we're going to try to bait for another hand trap. I'm going to activate the Zexal Conversion, revealing the double or nothing. If my opponent decides to ash this, that's fine, we already have our play. But if my opponent doesn't, I can then shuffle back this double or nothing, and that add a Zexal Weapon card, in this case being my Tornado Bringer. Now, why am I adding Tornado Bringer? The reason I'm adding Tornado Bringer is because I'm immediately then going to equip it to my Utopia Dragonar. In doing so, it prevents it from being targeted by card effects, thus making it immune to Imperm or Veiler. If my opponent wants to respond at this moment with the Imperm or Veiler, I can immediately chain the effect of my Utopia Dragonar, detaching 2 materials to summon out my number. At which case, I will then summon out my preferred target in Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray. In doing this, Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray will then get attached by the Utopia Force lying in my graveyard, since it was summoned by a rank 10 or higher Utopia monster. And it's at this point my opponent cannot even hand trap the Leo Utopia Ray because of the fact that its effect cannot be negated. So I'm going to activate the effect of my Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray, detaching a material from it to then re-equip from my deck a Pegasus Twin Sabers. From there, I'm then going to set the Crossout Designator and then pass turn to my opponent, of which I then have another play that we'll explore later. Going into our second test hand, the hand that we're going to be working with second is going to include 1 Photon Thrasher, 1 Armed Sage, 1 Astro Kuribo, 1 Infinite Impermanence, as well as 1 Effect Veiler. Now this is a good hand for a different reason, because it's a hand where we didn't open any of the pieces necessary to begin our combo, but we open enough extenders that we can access our combo. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to start, since I control no monsters, by special summoning out the Photon Thrasher. Now, since I only control a level 4 monster, I can then special summon out my ZS Armed Sage. From there, I'm going to overlay the ZS Armed Sage alongside the Photon Thrasher and summon out my ZS Utopic Sage. Activating Utopic Sage's effect, I'm going to detach 2 of its materials and then summon out a ZS monster from my deck, of which I'll summon out the much needed ZS Ascended Sage. From there, I'm then going to activate the effect on my Astro Kuribo, revealing a rank 4 monster like my C39 to special summon it to the field, making it a level 4, of which I can then overlay with the ZS Ascended Sage to make my Utopia double. Now you know where this is going to go. On summon ZS Ascended Sage's inherited effect will give my Utopia double the ability to search for a Utopia force, with also the benefit of being able to dodge hand traps. From there, I'll then activate Utopia Double's effect, detaching material to then grab a double or nothing from the deck, to then convert my Utopia Double into a Utopia, of which I'll then slap on a C39, and then activate my Utopia Force to convert it into a Dragonar. Once again, I'll then detach 2 materials from my Dragonar, unfortunately this time without protection, to summon out my Leo Utopia Ray, of which Leo Utopia Ray will then get attached a Utopia Force because it was summoned out by a rank 10 or higher Utopia monster. I'm then going to detach the material from that ultimately Utopia Ray to then equip my Pegasus Twin Sabers to it, of which then I will set the Infinite Impermanence, pass turning to my opponent with a very similar configuration with the first combo. Now that you've seen some of the combos that we have done, it's very apparent that our end boards always end up pretty much the same way. We'll end up with a Utopia Dragonar on the field, which can blank an attack by reducing the attacking monster's attack to 0. We have 2 disruptions in our ultimate Leo Utopia Ray with an effect negation, as well as a ZW Pegasus Twin Sabers that can negate effect on resolution. But the reason why I had you slap on that C39 before we ranked up into our Utopia Dragonar is because it now leaves our Utopia Dragonar with 2 materials that we can detach on our opponent's turn to summon out a number. In doing this, let's not forget that the Utopia Force will trigger to then attach itself to that new monster as a material, giving it access to its effects. And that leads to some very cool combos. The most basic of which is to summon out a 38, of which the material will attach to 38 to allow it to redirect an attack, but also act as spell negation. One of the more fun options is that if you're playing against a non-link focused deck, you can summon out a Baguska, of which the material will then attach to the Baguska to give it 2 turns of blocking your opponent out of the game. Some of the more creative options is potentially a number 4 Stealth Kraken, of which you can then attach the Utopia Force to it to turn your opponent's field to water monsters, as well as pop a card to inflict damage. And if you somehow decide to commit the extra space, you can also then play the Stealth Kraken. The reason being that when Stealth Kraken eventually dies, it will summon out the spawn attaching the Stealth Kraken. Then, when that Stealth Kraken spawn dies, it will summon back the Stealth Kraken to attach the spawn, guaranteeing that you always have a flow of an Xyz monster with a singular material to make a 2 material Zeus on the following turn. Finally, if you're playing against a back row focused deck, one of my favorites is to summon out a number 92 Heart Earth Dragon, because if they set 5 and then pass their turn, you can detach the 2 materials from your Utopia Dragon, summon out the Heart Earth Dragon, attach the material to it to then detach the material to banish their entire field, effectively ruin any back row options they have. And that's just some of the cool things you could do. You can always summon out Dragulis to book your opponent's field. You can summon out a Pain Game to then slap on a number 77 to banish their opponent's field on the following turn. The options are absolutely endless, and I think it's up to you guys to discover the rest. And that's going to do it once more for our Utopia deck profile. I'm not gonna lie, I really like this deck. The flexibility that this deck has in not only getting out Dragonar, but also abusing Dragonar creates so many creative lines despite being such a straightforward deck. And the simplicity of the strategy allows for it to function much like other meta decks, giving it much more meta potential than some of my prior profiles. Alas, this deck still has a bit of a problem against Nibiru, but I think with a bit of tuning and practice, this deck could definitely do well against the modern meta. Regardless, this has been Tony, your deck architect, with a Utopia deck profile. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.